our next speaker is actually three speakers. Adele Lafrance is currently studying the use of plant medicines and psychedelics in the healing of mental health issues, with a particular focus on ayahuasca and on eating disorders. Kenneth Tupper has scholarly interests including the psychedelic studies, the cross-cultural and historical uses of psychoactive substances, public, professional, and school-based drug education, and creating healthy public policy for currently illegal drugs. And Anja Loizaga-Velder is a German-Mexican clinical psychologist and psychotherapist who's been collaborating with indigenous healers and investigating the therapeutic potential of the ritual use of psychedelic plants for over 20 years. So we're going to get them all into microphones, and we'll begin in just a moment. Is it on?
Okay, thanks for sticking around. We're going to talk about ayahuasca and eating disorders. And I'm just wondering, how do I click to the next slide? Oh, how do I click to the next slide? Should it be here? Oh, there it is. Okay, thanks. Great, so I'm Adele and this is Anja, and Ken Tupper may be joining us. If so, it'll be in a few minutes. And so I'll tell you just a little story. So I'm a psychologist. I've been working with eating disorders in Canada for a number of years, since I've been a psychologist. And completely psychedelic naive. I didn't know anything about psychedelics, didn't even know that they could be therapeutic in any way until I encountered the Nature of Things documentary that featured Gabor Mate and his work with addictions. Around that time, I'd had two clients with whom I was associated with who died from eating disorders, and eating disorders are not like a terminal illness, and so it's very upsetting for the community of clinicians, of patients and families when we do experience these deaths. And so I was just really, really trying to find what else. During that time, I developed a conventional treatment model, bringing in families, interrupting cycles of emotion avoidance, interrupting patterns of intergenerational trauma, but even that, didn't seem to be enough. And so when I saw this documentary, I had to learn more, and so I did, both experientially and theoretically, and it was incredible. I saw so much healing happening. One of the retreats that I attended, I would say at least a third had a history of individuals had a history of eating problems, either disordered eating or full-blown eating disorders in their history. And then I met Anja, and we started talking about our shared interests in studying this. I emailed Ken, who I didn't even know. We kind of just formed this research team of individuals with expertise in ayahuasca, individuals with expertise in eating disorders, and Anja, who's the glue that holds us all together. She had the expertise in both areas. So we're really pleased to be able to present to you some of the findings from this project, and we hope, fingers crossed, that the manuscript will be published in the next 6 months if we're lucky. Okay, so eating disorders, a bit background: chronic, debilitating, life-threatening. They're the most lethal of all psychiatric mental health issues. Some researchers have stated that up to 20% of people diagnosed with an eating disorder will die, 10% related to medical complications related to symptoms, the other 10% by suicide. So it's a big deal, and not just that, they're super treatment resistant. It's really, really challenging area to work in, because part of the illness or the mental health issue, however we're going to define it, is denial. And unfortunately, in some managed care environments, in order to get care, you need to have motivation. So not only are they treatment resistant the best of times, but there are some settings in which, in order to receive treatment, you also need to have some deep and sustained motivation. Leaders in the field have suggested and are in agreement that new and promising treatments need to be explored, including treatments from across cultures. Now, we have yet to see them put their money where their mouth is, because when we submitted the manuscript for publication at one very respected eating disorder journal, it was rejected without review. So we have a little bit more work to do bridging the gap from this kind of work to the more conventional methods, but we are so committed to help get us there.
A little bit of background on ayahuasca. Most of you might know ayahuasca is a psychoactive plant-based beverage that is used by over 72 different Amazonian indigenous groups for therapeutic purposes in indigenous medicine, for ritual purposes, and it's prepared by boiling the liana. It's actually not only the root, it's the whole plant, together with the leaves of a bush. Chacruna is the native name for it. The scientific name is Psychotria viridis. And chacruna leaves contain DMT, whereas the liana contains beta-carbolines. And it's the synergy in between both plants that makes this brew psychoactive for about 4 to 5 hours. In indigenous communities, ayahuasca is always administered very respectfully in ceremonial context that is guided by experienced leader, usually specialists. Like in these traditions, there's specialists in the medicine field. Some of them are ayahuasca specialists. And it's revered for its physical, psychological, and spiritual benefits. Different research that has been carried out over the last 3 decades has indicated that the ayahuasca has a very promising potential for mental health, including a treatment, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, difficult grief processes, and problematic substance use. Actually, that's also mine. So when we started this research, we contacted several other researchers in the field of eating disorder, in the field of ayahuasca, and therapists who work with ayahuasca. And many of them said, whoa, that's a difficult one because you cannot give a person with eating disorders ayahuasca, because there is dietary restriction involved before the ceremony, which may trigger an eating disorder. Also, people with severe anorexia may suffer from additional health condition that will make the drinking of ayahuasca dangerous, like such as heart condition, etc., blood pressure. And especially those with eating disorders that involve a lot of purging may have lesions in the digestive tract, which can lead to really tough bleeding during the vomiting. So those were the concerns addressed. But when we started to recruit patients who had participated in ayahuasca ceremony, it was an observational study. We did not enroll those people. Those people decided to partake in ayahuasca on their own, and we just called out who had an experience and wants to share this in the context of the study so we can analyze this. So we found the astonishing result that many people really did get some benefit out of it, and Adele will tell you some more about it.
Okay, so the method is actually quite similar to the one of the previous presentation, so I'll go through it rather quickly in terms of the methodology. But we wanted to create a study that could be viewed as legitimate in the more conventional world, and so we restricted the analysis of interviews to those individuals who had a history of a diagnosed eating disorder using, the DSM structure. Who'd also used ayahuasca and Here, we also restricted the sample to its use in a traditional context. So it had to be a ceremonial context of sorts, whether in North America, South America, Central America. We used all kinds of different methods of advertising, including word of mouth, internet groups, Facebook pages. The average interview lasted about 2 hours, and we are still recruiting ceremonial leaders to get a different perspective. One of the limitations of our study is that this is a self-selected sample, so people who are more likely to have positive experiences, we're thinking are more likely to have participated, and we want to be able to kind of get a better overview of all of the issues to consider. So if anyone knows of any ceremonial leaders who may be interested in participating, we'd love to hear from them. So for this study, we did interview quite a number more of individuals, but those who met the criteria were 16 participants. Of those, 14 women, diagnoses of anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, but I mean, they could have met criteria for different disorders over time, really not thinking about the boxes per se. The age range was 21 to 50, very well-educated sample. Most participants had at least a bachelor's degree, if not more. Many of them were therapists or help in the helping profession. I loved this particular demographic. 13 out of the 16 participants had received formal eating disorder treatment. And so they are a great sample to compare their experiences with ayahuasca to their histories in traditional eating disorder programs in North America. And the ayahuasca use was varied from 1 single session to 30. Okay. There are a number of themes that emerged from the data. We're not going to go through them all. We'll highlight the first theme and the remaining ones that are in bold. We're working on a couple of publications, so they should be out in the next 6 months. So we'll give you the highlights from 4 of those themes. The first is a reduction in eating disorder thoughts and symptoms. I noticed a huge change in eating disorder symptoms. It's just hard to describe, but I felt like I had more distance between my behaviors and the thought patterns and the triggers, and it just felt like I didn't need to have those coping skills anymore. It was like my brain was reprogrammed. It's the only way I can describe it. I don't know exactly how it works. The other quote refers to an individual who came back from an ayahuasca retreat and stated that there just was no more eating disorder anymore. I still have a lot of eating disorder thoughts, but there are moments where I have less of them. And I think it was maybe the week after I initially did my first work. For some reason, my brain felt like the closest it's ever been to feeling completely normal. And then it kind of went back to how it was before, but I don't necessarily see that as a bad or as a tease. I think it's a good thing that I experienced that because it gave me a taste of recovery. And so by no means did ayahuasca create a simple fix in terms of eating disorder thoughts and symptoms, but people certainly talked about having more distance, having a taste of recovery, and in some cases, yes, there was a full and complete resolution of symptoms at the time of the interview. I would go away to an ayahuasca retreat and come home. My symptoms would get far worse for a period of time. It was a bit of a red flag, something we wanted to keep awareness of. Ayahuasca would stir up trauma and stuff. I'd come home and be like a victim to my habits, my brain, engage in eating disorder symptoms, and then I'd be able to pull myself out of it and have like a higher sort of baseline in terms of mood, insight, satisfaction, confidence, including eating disorder symptoms. Not just eating disorder thoughts and symptoms, though, were seen to decrease, but also comorbid symptoms. People talked about not having to use antidepressants anymore. People talked about significant reductions in anxiety, in depression, in experiences of symptoms of PTSD, suicidal thoughts, suicidal gestures, including use of substances that were considered problematic for that individual. I was a bit, having worked in eating disorders for as long as I have, I was a bit skeptical, honestly, when I was conducting these interviews. And so you can see the second quote. They're talking about how, the symptoms of anxiety and depression were gone. I'm like, they're all gone? Like, really? All gone? And the person kept saying, yes, they're all gone. Believe what I'm saying. But it was so amazing for me to see that, because those thoughts are usually so ingrained and resistant to change. So it's really exciting. And as an emotions researcher, I was really excited to look to see one of the, what I believe, mechanisms of change, sort of being able to work through emotions. So because I've done ayahuasca, I'm not going to diet anymore. Or because I did ayahuasca, I'm not going to compulsively exercise anymore. It wasn't that. I'm more able to be with myself. I'm more capable of experiencing my emotions so that I don't go to those behaviors that shove those emotions down that I don't want to experience anymore. So really kind of getting to this idea that an eating disorder is a means of coping with a pain that feels too much to bear. I choose my emotions, they don't choose me. You know what? Sometimes I choose anger, sometimes I choose disappointment, and sometimes I even choose sadness. It's probably one of my favorite quotes out of the whole thing, because if you can have self-efficacy over emotion, you've just eliminated a need for all kinds of problematic coping strategies. And then shifts in body image as well. I saw myself as a rotting, decaying skeleton, and then as this beautiful, full-bodied woman with this long hair, and I wanted to be that woman. In eating disorder conventional treatment, we always say, the body image thoughts, don't worry about them. They're the last to go. They may never even go. And then this. I just was so excited, by these findings.
Yeah, thank you, Adele. So it's really impressive what we found there, in spite of all those challenges that came up, that I mentioned before by other researchers and other therapists. There seems to be a huge potential for change if this is directed in a good way and integrated in a good way. That's what I want to cover in the next one, which is ayahuasca intercultural therapy. Like, how can we do the bridge in between traditional medicine and psychotherapy? So our participants stated there's not even a point of comparison. I mean, I cannot compare it. It's much deeper. A human being in psychology cannot go so deep. It was really a deep repair. It changed my life. It reset. Like there's many things people say, I cannot express them. Something happened that was much beyond the understanding of my brain, right? I feel like traditional therapy methods, meaning conventional therapy methods, didn't work very well on me. I mean, I feel like I was in it for so long that I don't remember any sort of milestone that I made in the last 15 years, even with an eating disorder, Like, I didn't believe that it was even possible to get over it. It's just the thought I'd had to suffer with this for the rest of my life. And this is really terrible for people, finding that there is no hope. And then they have those experiences, and suddenly there is hope. There is something that might be resolved. So can we go to the next one? Yeah, that's the next one. Okay. Others compared ayahuasca with standard and continued like, during ceremony, you can't go anywhere. You can't hide from it. It was like one of the first times where I just sat and like a fear, a sadness, or sat in my memories that I was trying to hide from, Like that's this image that comes up that said it's like an inner mirror that goes beyond denial. That's very few things that I know of that do for you, where you just can't leave. So maybe go to the challenges. Those were mentioned by participants. They said it was difficult after the ceremony to sit with the lingering pain, with the darkness, with the fear from ceremony. Many of them did not get proper integration or were not even pointed out to the importance to seek professional help, just like to be able to cope with those experiences. Or just did not have the access to integration service, where to find a therapist that who knows about ayahuasca experience and does not label this like as a drug use behavior or something really crazy. And how could they discuss their experience with a doctor to rule out a contraindication? That was like another difficult part, like how to find if this was something was good for them or maybe harmful for them. Then and disapproval by family or friends because it's not a culturally integrated practice in North America. And then the accessibility. Many people needed to travel far in order to have the possibility to participate in an ayahuasca ceremony in a legal context. Very expensive also. And the political thing, is this something legal, illegal, what I'm doing to gain back my health? So, following risks were identified by participants, whether experienced or potential. So in the preparation phase, some participants did mention that the dieting trigger like food restriction behavior. This can be a risk, and I think it's important to point this out. Then the psychological decompensation in the absence of skills for regulation, like for the capacity of hold this pain they were confronted with or relived, and the absence of the psychotherapeutic support, and the concerns about frequency and how often would they need to partake in an ayahuasca ceremony to complete the healing process, right? None of them really stated it could be addictive. Well, and if any of you have experienced ayahuasca, you would understand why it's very bitter and it's a really tough experience innerly. So nobody would take it just for fun. So the other risks were those legal issues that I already mentioned, the quality of the ayahuasca, who prepared it, what's in there. Is there any added plants other than chacruna and ayahuasca? Because right now with the spread of ayahuasca into the West, sometimes other cheaper ingredients are mixed in there, and they can be dangerous psychologically or physically. And one of our participants regrettably also experienced that she was sexually harassed during the ceremony by a shaman, which is a very difficult situation while being in this undefensive state of and very vulnerable state of non-ordinary state of consciousness. It's a huge transgression and has a potential for huge re-traumatization instead of resolving a trauma.
And unlike the themes, that we identified, most people talked about, we decided to list all of the risks and challenges that came up, whether or not they were perceived or real, because we wanted to kind of give the most responsible view of the data, knowing that it was from a single source. So really quickly, a couple recommendations was from the participants were for Canadian and US governments to be able to recognize the value of ayahuasca. And also, though, more access to integration, psychotherapy support, including some eating disorder specific layers to the work, meal support, symptom interruption, more around emotion regulation. So that was something that people certainly talked about. Quick summary of the impact of ayahuasca on eating disorder. I'll just read the one quote that illustrates is the best. If I'd known that there was a way to make certain symptoms just go away, I would have done it 20 years ago. Limitations, of course, self-selected sample, one perspective. We're working on that. Really well-educated group, so that could have influenced even how they talked about their experiences. We had interview prompts, and we had some interests that we were exploring, so that also could have influenced the data. And then definitely linguistic and cultural homogeneity. In fact, all were English speakers, and all were from North America, with one exception, an individual from Europe. Take-home message shows promise, worth exploring further, and it's already being used among eating disorder clients. And so I think that we have a responsibility to find ways to help make it safer. And we can do that, in terms of preparation, intention support, integration, but also adjunctive psychotherapy. So, we really do believe in the potential for this, although a lot more needs to be done. And that's all we have for today. Thank you.
Okay. No time for questions.
We can chat with you afterwards.